Hello, once again, it's Mike Jacobs. Today, we're going to discuss how quantum hypnosis has something to do with your spiritual awakening, or it could. They're actually tied together, and it's something that I just never really thought about, and I was very surprised with what I learned. So we're going to talk about that today. You might be able to leverage this tremendously. Before I do that, I just wanted to introduce myself as, again, Mike Jacobs. I do videos to help people accelerate through their spiritual awakening. As I started learning more about my spiritual awakening, I started running across somebody that I'm sure you've been running across if you've been doing this a little bit. And it's a woman, and her name is Delores Cannon. Delores Cannon spent 40 years perfecting and using a technique that she calls QHHT, Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. She's an amazing author. If you happen to be able to pick up one of her books, she's written, I think, nearly 20 of them, and they're fascinating. And I'll tell you why, and I'll tell you how this ties in. This, by the way, isn't all about her, this video. It's just, this was my pathway into this knowledge and wisdom. So she and her husband, back in the 60s, her husband was in the armed services. Just as a sideline for fun, he started dabbling into hypnosis. There's a long story behind that. And she found it very interesting as well. And they were traveling the world, in all the different places you go, and they were working on this. Well, to fast forward a little bit, they actually stumbled upon a way to go much deeper, much more straightforward approach to getting very deep, in fact, deeper than you really apparently get with normal hypnosis techniques. You get down, in this case, you get down into the theta level. Theta level is the level right before full sleep. So you don't want to be in full sleep when you're doing this, but you want to be deep. So that's the theta level. And that's where they were able to get to. They were able to do very deep regressions of people's past lives. And that's where this thing starts to tie in. Past lives have a lot of clues. And so they were able to use hypnosis to go in and find past life traumas. So people would come to them and they would have a problem in their current life. And they didn't really know where it originated because they couldn't remember anything happening to them in this current life. Now you can also go into your current life with hypnosis too and start looking around to identify traumas. But in this case, these were traumas that couldn't really be tied to a current lifetime necessarily. So they became very well known at being able to take people into very deep regressions, into multiple past lives, try and identify that time in their life where something happened to them, whether it was just a psychological trauma, whether it was a physical trauma, which created a psychological trauma, whatever the case is. You go in and you identify these things, you recognize them, you acknowledge them, and then you release them from your life. And this is also ties into the spiritual awakening side, because to me, it's shadow work at a deep level of shadow work, right? So in shadow work, we're looking to identify things that have shaped our personality and our belief systems that are affecting our lives. And you don't know why. Sometimes they're good things, and sometimes they're just things that don't need to be there that are plaguing you. And in this case, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, it could be plaguing you. So that was fascinating to me. So there was healing being done in this case and with this method. And it was very interesting. As I learned more about my spiritual awakening, I could see how it is really just a form of shadow work, really, and a technique that you could use, to do more effective shadow work and really go much deeper if you really needed to do that. And then I saw an ad on the internet, and it was about becoming a level 1 QHHT practitioner. And it was a course, and they were running a special, and it fascinated me. I thought, well, this would be one way where I can learn a lot more about this. And who knows, maybe it's something I would want to do also. But at the very least, I would learn what this was about. And it was taught by Delores herself, which she's passed away several years ago. But these courses are recordings of multi-day courses that have been taught by she and her daughter. And they have 3 levels of certification. So I thought, well, I'll just take the level 1, see what I can learn. It would be interesting. I love to learn. So as I got into this, they take you into what the technique is and kind of where it applies and where it doesn't apply. People that will get something from it, but people that aren't going to get something from it, likely different scenarios. But what absolutely blew me away that I was unaware of is that the healing they're talking about isn't just psychological healing. It's also physical healing. And it's done at that time. And it's not like you find something and you address it, and maybe it it's tied to a traumatic experience you had in a past life. Like maybe you were in a war or something and were injured very badly. So you have some psychological trauma and then you recovered. And maybe then fast forward in this lifetime, you've got your shoulders just very sore all the time. You can't figure out why. The doctors can't figure out why. You haven't had an accident in this lifetime that you can remember, but nevertheless, you have a very, very sore shoulder. That's just kind of a simple example that I'm trying to throw out here. And going in and identifying that, you're able to not only identify the past life trauma that probably is tied to that soreness, but other things that could be wrong with you at the time, you're able to address as well. What I'm getting at is in the session, you'd identify the trauma, and by identifying it, you'd release it. So maybe there's some psychological things that were hanging around from the psychological aspect of your injury, but also you can get rid of the pain in your shoulder, physically pain in the shoulder that way. It'll just go. But in addition to that, you can address other things that could be causing you problems and have them addressed and healed. Now, this borders on, to me, a miracle. We all know, the miracles that have been written about in the Bible and other works. Those things to me tie back to not really magic or a miracle per se, but the ability to manage energy. And as we recall from probably some of my other videos, if you've seen them, or things you've also seen, Nikola Tesla, a very famous guy that worked with energy. He was right at the forefront of alternating current, and the fight between alternating current and direct current has nothing to do with the automobile manufacturer. He would say, it's a very famous quote. He would say, if you want to uncover, don't quote me, but it's pretty close here. If you want to uncover the mysteries of the universe, think in terms of energy, vibration, and frequency. And so what this ties back to are things I've learned about how you manifest. You manifest through really managing energy. It's about feeling the emotion of having that which you seek in a manifestation cycle. So it's not, gee, I would like this, I'm praying for this, or I'm wishing for this. You're reinforcing that you don't have it yet. The trick to law of attraction and manifesting and these things is to embrace the emotion of the feeling you will have as if you've already achieved that which you're seeking. And what this really is under the surface is, and I'm not going to go too deep in this video on this, but it's an understanding of how energy works, how particles make up atoms and atoms make up molecules. And at the molecular level can be manipulated through vibrational frequency of emotions, for example. Emotion is what they call the language of manifestation, the emotion of the reality you're trying to create. You can feel that emotion now. And when you do that, you're sending a signal at the molecular, atomic, and particle level to create that which you're seeking, that reality. I know that gets kind of deep, and maybe you're not ready for that yet. It was a lot to try and take in. I'm pretty comfortable with it now. But what I see is that what we're talking about in this video is the skill of being able to manipulate in that manner to heal something. This is what I believe miracles were and things like that. It was, it's definitely kind of a miracle thing, but from a scientific perspective, this is what you're dealing with. You're dealing with energy, frequency, and vibration, and you're being able to communicate with it. So let's get off of that little segue. That's just a little background to what I'm going to go into. In these sessions, what's so interesting is that you've got the client who's been put under hypnosis and gone deep, and there's communication that goes on with them as you traverse different lifetimes trying to find that point that the trauma was created. And once you go through these cycles, which are fascinating in themselves, and learn what you can learn that applies to the reason that the client is there, is then you do something that really ties into the spiritual awakening. Is you call on, and this is what this couple really created, was the ability to go into the subconscious level and communicate very easily with the subconscious, which is really the same person. But in these sessions, it comes out, you start communicating with the subconscious like it's a third party. So it's like three of you. It's the client, the subconscious, and you, the practitioner doing the session. And it's crazy. All of a sudden, you get this subconscious voice and personality that's different than the client in different ways to talk to. So you're having like this three-way conversation. It's almost like the client basically there, but they're not asleep, but they're quiet. They're not really engaging in the conversation. It's almost like a practitioner having a conversation with the parent of a child, like the child isn't in the room, but they are in the room, right? It's just kind of like when you remember being a child, you know, your parents having a talk with your doctor or something like that in front of you, and they're talking like you're not there. It's kind of like that. It's a very interesting experience. But furthermore, into the point here, this conversation with the subconscious, I realized, it's not like it was an epiphany or something. They tell you this, that this subconscious is really higher self, which is the oversoul of the client. And you're having this conversation with a much more knowledgeable entity, more knowledgeable than the version of the soul that's the client. And this is what we get into with our spiritual awakening, right? This is what we're talking about here in a spiritual awakening, among many different aspects of it. One of the aspects is duality, this realization that we're part of a soul that is in another reality, a higher dimension, and we're a very small part of that soul down here in this body having a human experience. And we learn as we go through the process, once we get comfortable with this concept, that this is what duality really is. And one of the things we try and work on is opening up a line of communication to our higher self through meditation and things like that. You can start communicating with your higher self. They're there to help you. They want to help you, and they're trying to communicate with you all the time, and they never get through to an awful lot of people. Hopefully at some point they do, but you know, they're trying to reach out. They can't talk to us, you know, straight away necessarily, unless we learn how to reach out to them through meditation, learn how to work with our communication chakras, things, and so forth. You know, that's very spiritual awakening stuff. And so here I am in these recorded sessions, watching this three-way conversation going on, where the practitioner, Delores Cannon in this case, is talking to somebody's oversoul or their higher self. And it's fascinating. But one of the things that came out of this is the healing that can take place because your higher self is in the fifth dimension or higher. When you're in those dimensions, it's a different energy dimension. You're in a light body, which is light. Light is energy and frequency. So they have the ability to do things that we can't really do down here. We're in a different dimension, a much lower vibrational frequency, but they aren't. And they're tapped into this body of this part of them, that's this part of that soul that's here in front of us on earth. And so the higher self can go in at this time, look through and do an assessment of the body and looking for things that aren't right, and has the ability to notice things maybe that are there that the client doesn't know about yet because it hasn't started to bother them yet, but they're trying to happen, eventually going to happen, but things in the future, things to do with your cognitive abilities, dementia and things like that. Other things having to do with maybe osteoporosis, you know, things like that maybe haven't started to hurt you yet or bother you, but they're definitely there. They're definitely on the way. Able to go through, do an assessment of the body, and then request to the higher self that maybe, since everyone's here and we're in this session, that they can maybe go through and fix a lot of these things that are wrong with the body. And it can be little heart problems that haven't caused you trouble yet, but will when you get older. It just blew my mind. And there were a couple of sessions where some things were healed that were amazing, but there were many examples, amazing afflictions being healed. Anyway, I can't go through all the things that I heard there, but I just stood there in awe, realizing that this is such a connection to a spiritual awakening and what you have to go through to understand and acknowledge these things about energy and vibrational frequency and so forth, and go through the process of getting over something that just seems incredulous to you, or it did to me. And then here is this QHHT process that deals directly with that and deals with our higher self, or the higher self. Absolutely fascinating. So I wanted to share that. There is a tie-in. I encourage you to go deeper in this area and look into this a little bit to fully understand, because in itself it's valuable, but it can help you understand better this relationship we have with the higher dimensions, our higher self, and this dimension that we're working our way through. And this all falls right in line with your spiritual awakening journey. So that's all I've got for you. If you thought this was interesting, please like it. If you'd like to hear more of my videos as they come out, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to comment, I'd really like to hear your comments and understand how I can make these videos be right on topic for you in future videos. Thanks again. Be well. Namaste.